Let's quickly touch on the new economic policy by Lenin. You see, remember you can always play the video at a playback speed so that you can hear nicely in case there are parts that you miss. You can always go back, right? So now they said the new economic policy was basically Lenin's way of trying to take back Russia's economy back to its normal state, right? But now, what actually led to him introducing the whole what you call the new economic policy? Now we have to go back to the 1918 civil war in Russia, right? Now during the civil war, Lenin wanted to ensure that the government has all the control and Russia gets back to its normal state, right? He decided to introduce something that we call the war communism. So basically, war communism was Lenin's decision to implement pure communism in Russia during the civil war, right, to ensure that it goes back to its normal state. But however, you need to note that the war communism backfired. It backfired due to a number of reasons. You see, the number of reasons we're going to look at them one by one. We're going to look at them one by one, yes, to ensure that we get an understanding of what we're talking about, right? Now, if you look at the first paragraph, you're going to see that now. We're going to see that now. Lenin's government, they wanted to take over. They introduced something that they call state monopoly. It means that they wanted the state to rule everything. You see. So what did they do? They basically commanded They wanted to control over all grains. It means that whatever that the peasants produced, they wanted to be in control, right? You see, they didn't give the peasants a chance to basically have control of what they produced, right? See, again, they used the ruthless tactics on the people that were rich, that refused to with the surplus grain. So it means that if ever you produce 10, maybe let's say you don't need the other 3, you had to give that 3 to the government. But some people refused with that 3, you see, and then hence that it led to them, some of them being imprisoned, some of them being killed publicly, you see, publicly hanged, you see. Those were ruthless tactics, right? Now, since Lenin had used such ruthless tactics, it led to so many peasants being being demotivated, because now it led to so many peasants being demotivated. They refused to produce. They refused to produce any grains between 1914 and 1921. And now the thing of forcefully taking away grains and other things from peasants, they called it the forceful requisition. You see, now this forceful requisition, they basically demotivated peasants. They said, you know what, we are no longer producing because the government, when we produce, the government is forcefully taking away our things, right? Again, you look at the second paragraph that says, okay, now, in addition to the above, Lenin's government decided to ban private ownership, right? So it means that now individuals were no longer allowed to They were no longer allowed to own any private companies as individuals. You see, now since they were not allowed to own any private there was no private ownership. It basically meant that everything was now state owned. So it means it was owned by the government. Now everything was state owned. Now, since everything was state-owned from large enterprises, they basically nationalized everything. So nationalizing things is basically bringing things under the government's control, right? Now, what you need to understand is why did this thing fail is because now, these industries, they are the backbone of Russia, right? Now, what the backbone is basically what allows you to stand up straight and walk, right? Now, since this was the backbone of Russia, it caused a big problem because the people that were given to control these things, they had no experience, you see. They had no experience in controlling those things. So it basically led to them to failing to control these things, you see. Just like a relationship, it failed dismally. See, it failed. The whole communism failed dismally. You see, taking control of these big enterprises while you have no experience, what happened to them? They failed dismally. Now, they also introduced this thing of basically trying to trade with peasants, right? Peasants are basically poor farmers, right? Now, they were trying to trade with poor farmers. We call that food rationing, right? Now, yes. Now, that being the case, they meant that, okay, we are trading with you as a peasant, right? It means that you give us this, we give you this, right? You see, now they were limiting essentials, basic essentials like what? Soap, brown bread, things that someone needed to survive. And if you are limiting people those things, it meant that you are basically you are sending them into poverty, right? You see, you are sending them straight into poverty, you see. Now, basic essentials are basically things that you need to survive, right? You see now, and you not being given these things now, it's a problem. Now, the government introduced something that we call bagmen, right? Not batchmen, but bagmen, right? Now, the bagmen were basically meant to go around the world trading with go around the country, trading with with peasants. Maybe we say, okay, I have apples, and then I give you apples, you give me maize meal, you see, just to ensure that, okay, what you have, I have too, you see, because you cannot just survive on maize meal alone. So at some point, you are going to need some meat, right? Now, what was the problem with these bagmen things? The thing is, they didn't trade at fair value, you see. It means that now, they didn't trade at fair value, you see. So, if right now I give you 10 kg of sugar, you have to give me at least 5 kg of salt, right? Yes, you might think it's not a fair trade, but let's be honest. What's more valuable, salt or sugar? Sugar is more valuable, right? You see, so it means, if you give me 10 kg of salt, I have to give you 5 kg of sugar, because sugar is more valuable than salt. You can spend the whole year with that salt, you see, already you have it. So you relate to what I'm saying, right? Now you see, and this led to peasants feeling peasants being sent straight to poverty. Hence, this shows you that the war communism didn't work, because these bagmen, they didn't trade it a fair value. You see, they would give you 10 apples and then they would take away 20 oranges. Is that fair? No, that's not fair, right? You see, yes. So as we move on, we say now. Remember, when I started this thing, I told you that war communism was introduced during the civil war in Russia. That happened from 1918, right? Now, when war communism was introduced, now remember that the Bolsheviks were the ones that were in power, right? They were the ones that introduced war communism. Now, it basically meant that the Bolsheviks, their army is called the Red Army, and it's one of the biggest armies in this world. See now, they were controlled by their needs, you see, because the Red Army, they needed what? They needed food, they needed basic essentials in order to be able to fight. And now, how is the government going to feed? How was Lenin's government going to feed the Red Army? They had to tax people, pressurize people and tax them very heavily. You see, they will tax them very heavily. They will put heavy taxes on them. You see, for instance, let's say you produce 10 apples and then they take 7. You see, why are they doing this? They are trying to give that to the Red Army, to ensure that the Red Army has the necessary food in order for them to go and fight. And you see, now, since there was this thing of giving the Red Army the food, what did the peasants decide to do? They decided to resist. They decided to resist communism. They said, you know what? This communism is not fair to us. Why are we producing food for people that are killing other people? You see, we are basically feeding someone who may kill you at any time. You see, it doesn't make any sense. You see, they resisted communism, which showed you that just like your relationship or communism did it failed. You see, now in 1920. Something very bad happened in Russia. Unfortunately, they went through something that we call drought. Basically, there was a shortage of food, there was a shortage of supplies, there was a shortage of water, there was no rain, you see. So it means farmers couldn't produce. And again, you need to remember that now this happened during the winter season. Now, unlike here in South Africa, when you go through winter, you can feel that, okay, yeah, it's winter by name. But in Russia, there is snow, you see. It's very cold. It gets very, very, very cold, you see. And now, since it gets very, very cold, it becomes a problem, because when it gets cold in Russia, there is also snow. And that snow, it means that the people in Russia cannot produce any crops, right? And now remember, they were resisting. They refused to produce. So it means that now there was a shortage of food. And since there was a shortage of food, they went through something that we call the Great Famine, right? So basically, during the Great Famine, Russia lost 5 million people. See, 5 million people. So to put it in an easier perspective, 5 million people, they didn't get killed. They died because of hunger and starvation. Now, if people are dying from hunger and starvation while you're in power, what does that say about our government? Our government is failing It's failing the people. You see, it's like you come to school and you die from hunger while teachers are there. That can never happen, you see. We know, when you're hungry, go and tell Moy, go and tell me, tell Richard, tell the principal, they're going to help you. You see, now, with 5 million people dying because of hunger and because of hunger and starvation, it showed you that the war communism failed, right? Now, with all the above that I've mentioned so far, you can see war communism was a total fail. You see, it's like it was like your relationship. It's a total fail right now. Then and people now, how do you think the people reacted? Obviously, the people want Lenin out of power. They said, no, we want Lenin out of power. We want Lenin out of power. We want Lenin out of power. So since they wanted Lenin out of power, what now? Lenin saw that, okay, the people no longer want him in power because he claimed to come with the revolution. He said he's going to change Russia, but it's becoming worse and worse, you see. Now, since Russia was becoming worse and worse, what did Lenin decide to do? He decided that now it was time for change. You see, it was time for change. So what did he decide to do? He decided to abandon what? Decided to abandon war communism. So to abandon is basically to do away with something, you see, just like your father abandoned you see. Yes. So he abandoned war communism and decided to do what? And he introduced what? The new economic policy. Now, how was the new economic policy introduced? Now, they met in the capital city of Russia, Moscow, right? The Socialist Party. So the Socialist Party is basically the Bolsheviks, right? They met in order to introduce the new economic policy to see how could they change the economy of Russia while remaining into power. So they decided to introduce something that they call the new economic policy. Now they wanted to bring up reforms. It means they wanted to bring up changes and things that could help them to be successful in Russia. You see, yes. Now, as he had that famous quote, taking one step backwards to take 2 steps forward, retreat for a new attack, right? Yes. You see, that's what basically happened when they were introducing the new economic policy. Now we are going to look at what policies were introduced under the new economic policy. The new economic policy, they allowed private ownership, but on a limited scale. It means that now people were allowed to have private ownerships on a limited scale. It means that the number of people that could own the businesses were limited, right? You see, unlike in war communism, when no one was allowed to basically own anything, but in new economic policy, people were allowed. And then, but they were also allowing people to say, okay, companies can now hire people, but how many people did they have to hire? 20 or less than 20 people, you see, 20 or less people, right? You see, now this meant that this is capitalism because you are allowing people to privately get hired. Unlike during war communism, where everyone used to work for the state, but now we are allowing private ownership, private employment. So this shows you that this is an element of capitalism that was introduced by Lenin, which shows you that the economic policy, yes, did introduce elements of capitalism. Right. Now we're saying again, the next paragraph as it states, the new economic policy allowed peasants to sell their surpluses, right? Now, like I said, let's say, for instance, you have produced 10 apples and you are going, you gave government their tax, three of them, and then you're left with 7. Your family is going to use 2. So it means that the rest is what? The rest we call it surplus, right? Now, that surplus, you are allowed to sell it on an open market. You see, since you are allowed to sell it on an open market, it basically meant now peasants could become what? Could become richer right now. You see, peasants could become what? It allowed peasants to become richer because the more they sell, the more richer they became. The more surplus they sold, the more richer they became. Because obviously, if you're going to sell and then you're going to get your money, you got to get motivated to what? To make more, right? To make more money, you see. So now, since the peasants were allowed to sell their surpluses, like I said, it increased production because now they knew that, okay, if ever I just pay my taxes, it's easy for me to sell my surplus and become become more rich, right? So that led to us having some Ku Klux that led to peasants having rich peasants being given the names Ku Klux, right? Which basically meant rich peasants. You see, Ku Klux, which basically meant what? Rich peasants. So see, with rich peasants being there, basically showed you that it was an element of capitalism because remember, in a communist state, you're not allowed to have any private ownership, but in a capitalist state, you're allowed to have private ownership. You're allowed to become rich. There's a division of classes. It means that there's the poor, there's you, there's the middle class, and then there's me, right? The rich. You see, yes, that's how it works, right? You see, yes. Moving on. Now, they also introduced during Lenin's time of the NEP, they introduced the central bank, right? Now the purpose of the central bank was basically to control credit, right? Credit is basically loans, you see, to ensure that people are not given loans beyond what they can afford. For instance, if right now I was to borrow you 500, and then how are you going to pay me because you're still at school? So it means that I might leave cheap, you might leave cheap, you see. One of us might leave because one of us might leave because you can't afford to pay me back. You might have 3 to 4 years having to pay me back my 500. You see, sounds like small money on paper, but it's a lot of money if ever you can't afford. So basically, they were trying to control that, to say, okay, you cannot give people credit beyond their affordability. You see, yes, again. They tried to control inflation flow. Like I said, inflation is basically the increase of prices, right? So you can imagine I think bread is 17 rands right now, Alban, right? The one that we eat. I don't know people who eat different bread, maybe the ones that eat Blue Ribbon, but anything other than that, or maybe Sasco too, right? Now you can imagine buying bread, it's 17 rand now. But if ever we experience high inflation rate, the price of that bread is going to increase. It might be 50 rand. But now they needed to make sure that doesn't happen, right? So in 1924, what did they decide to do? They decided to introduce another currency, right? So this currency was basically known as the Ruble, right? ROUBLE, right? Yes, that was how that's how the currency was basically. That was the new currency. They did away with the old currency. You see now, but more to that, companies were allowed to offer loans to prospective business people, right? People who had the potential of becoming big. To say, okay, you have a small spaza shop here, but why don't you just take a loan and then you extend your spaza shop, right? See, yes, that's the new economic policy, right? See, now going on, did I skip something? Okay, I didn't. Right. Going on, you would see that now the new economic policy, they also allowed foreign investment, right? So they also allowed what? Foreign investment. So when you're allowing foreign investment, you are basically saying companies from other countries can come and build their companies in your country. So it basically means that, okay, for instance, you look at things like McDonald's being from the USA, it came here in South Africa to build its company here, right? So for us, we call that foreign investment, you see. Now, why did they allow foreign investment? They were saying, okay, we are trying to develop the country, and if you are going to allow foreign investment, it's going to be easy because you are going to have companies that you don't have here in Russia. So for instance, you're bringing in a McDonald's, and again, it's going to help with the unemployment rate, because why? When these companies come and they build their companies here in Russia, it becomes easy for them to the people that they are going to hire, they are the people that are from Russia. This is going to reduce the unemployment rate. It's also going to introduce the poverty rates that are happening in Russia, right? Yes. Again, yes. As we move on, now this showed you that allowing foreign investment. Now remember, foreign investment is not allowed in what you call in communism. You see, it's not allowed in communism, because why are we allowing other countries to come? To come into our account? But with communism, we are trading alone. But now with capitalism, we are allowing foreign investments to come in. So Russia, the NEP opened up that paveway to say, okay, foreign companies can come and they can come and do their operations in Russia. Yes. So as we move on, we're saying the NEP, they also allowed the Ku Klux. The Ku Klux are basically the rich peasants, right? Like I said, KULAKS. Ku Klux, the rich peasants during the NEP, right? Yes. Now, they also allowed the Ku Klux to hire workers, right? They also allowed Ku Klux to hire workers and also to lease land. It means they could borrow land. Maybe, listen, you want to borrow land and build a company there. You want to borrow land for farming, right? You see, but they borrow it for what? For farming, right? That's what the Ku Klux did with the land when they were leasing the land. Now, as they were leasing the land, it basically led to the payment of what? The payment of money. Right now, we could now use money to pay what? To pay each other. Like for instance, salaries and wages were paid to workers. You see, now the government could receive its taxes through money. You see, other than them busy receiving fruits and vegetables, they can receive their payments through what? Through money. You see, now since you can receive those payments through money. It means we can use that money to develop the economy of what? Of Russia. We develop infrastructures, we develop the community. To see, that's the whole purpose of what? Of the payments of money. So the NEP allowed the coup class to say, okay, you can hire workers, and these workers can be paid via what? They can be paid via money. And when you're paying workers, you're paying them through salaries and wages and all that stuff, right? Yes. Again, we're saying the NEP also allowed local industries to hire foreign expertise, right? Foreign expertise to come and help with skills that were scarce. So basically, skills that were scarce is like, okay, maybe 1 or 2 people know these skills, right? So, and we cannot continue using one or two people. Why don't we just bring in foreign people to come and help us? For instance, let's say using machines or building cars. Why don't we just, if we can't build a car, why don't we call people from foreign countries to come and help us build what? These cars. And as they're helping us bring these cars, they're developing what? There's a development of skills, because they're going to teach the people in what? In Russia how to develop what? How to make those cars. You see, they are developing skills. They're developing skills that are what? That are scarce. You see, but that's how that was the whole purpose of what? Of the new economic policy allowing what? The new economic policy allowing allowing the local industries to bring in what? To bring in foreign aspects, to bring in foreign enterprises, right? You see, now bringing in foreign enterprises was that it's an element of capitalism. You see, anything that's foreign in a communist country is an element of what? Of capitalism, because foreign countries, they don't trade with what? They don't trade with remind me again, they don't trade, communism countries, they don't trade with foreign countries, right? Yes. And then again, we said the NEP also allowed the government to have trade agreements. So basically, when we are saying to have trade agreements, it means that we are going to supply you with oil, you're going to supply us with 1, 2, 3. We can come build our companies in your country, you can come build our companies in a country. And now remember, Russia is communist, right? They were communist at that time. But now, them having trade agreements with capitalist countries, it basically shows you that it's an element of what? Of capitalism, because they are opening up. See, it's easy for them to basically say, okay, not that it's easy, it's making things easy to say, okay, we have a trade agreement, we are going to have a cooperation. If ever you come and manufacture oil here, we can come and manufacture gold in your country. See, that's a trade agreement. You say, okay, you are going to supply us with apples, we're going to supply with what? With watermelons, right? Yes. As we continue, and then yes. Now moving on to the last page, and then we said the NEP allowed Lenin's government to divide up equally the Tsar Nicholas's estate, right, and allow a few peasants to be, where a few peasants got a chance to have the right to inherit the property of Tsar Nicholas, right? Now remember that Tsar Nicholas, when he died, he didn't die, I mean, he was killed, right? So now when Tsar Nicholas was killed, it basically meant that remember, they killed his whole family, so it means that his assets were left they were left with no one to take care of them. Now Lenin's government, they said, okay, it's fine, they can be divided up to the people, right? They can be divided amongst the people, right? To say, okay, you can have this, someone can have this, you can have this, someone can have this, right? Now that meant that now that's an element of capitalism, because we are not usually used to dividing things in a communist state. But now because we are allowing peasants to take part of the estate that was owned by the previous government, it shows that this is an element of capitalism. It shows you that now Lenin favored capitalism more than communism, right? Yes. And then lastly, we said they also allowed people to save up money, right? They said, okay, you can now take your money and put it in the bank and save up your money. Now, what are you going to use that money for? It's just your future investment, to say, okay, you can use this money to open up a small business, and then you build yourself to become rich. You see, it all starts from you saving your money in these banks, right? You see, that's what the new economic policy allowed them to do. You see, to say, okay, peasants can now save up money and use this thing for for future investment. You see, now they knew that, okay, whenever we have these small businesses, we can charge them tax, and that tax is going to be used to develop Russia. You see, the amount that is being given to the government, they can use it to develop Russia. They can open up new enterprises, they can open up a lot of things. You see, that's going to help the economy of Russia, right? Now, yes, and then in conclusion, it depends on the question that they have asked you, right? Depends on the question that they have asked you. So me, I cannot conclude right now, because there's no question that has been posed to me. So what I would advise you to do is while you are listening to the VN, you read through your essay so that you can easily remember, right? If you can even pause and write, remember you can always play back at a young speed, 0.15 asas.